cars that were ahead of their time. The Mazda MPV. When the first generation Mazda MPV debuted in 1989, it was a minivan that didn't quite conform to the mold. It was a curious mix of a minivan and an SUV, a formula that seems odd at the time but now looks like pure genius. Unlike the typical front-wheel drive, low-to-the-ground minivan of that era, the MPV had a higher ride height and even offered all-wheel drive. This feature made it a lot more rugged and versatile than its competitors. Whilst today's minivan market is dominated by front-wheel drive family hauler with optional all-wheel drive, Mazda was already thinking ahead in the late 80s. At the time, families were snapping up minivans and sedans, not SUVs. The idea of a lifted, off-road capable people hauler wasn't exactly on anyone's radar yet. The interior was roomy, just like any minivan of that time, but it didn't have sliding doors. It looked and felt a bit more adventurous, even if most owners never ventured beyond suburban driveways. Today, SUVs are dominating the market, with family bypassing minivans entirely. Yet automakers are still trying to make their minivans look like SUVs, as seen with models like the Kia Carnival, which adopt a more rugged aesthetic to appeal more modern buyers. The MPV was ahead of its time in trying to bridge the gap between a minivan and an SUV. If it had been released today, it might have been a bigger hit, but back then it was just a little too different for the minivan crowd. If we take a look at the second generation MPV, it went back to the traditional minivan styling, proving that people were definitely not ready for such a change. The Pontiac Aztek, aka the ugliest car sold in North America, at least according to the internet. This car, although it looked weird, predicted the modern crossover coupe trend, just about 15 years too early. When it debuted in the early 2000s, it was controversial, to say the least. The design featured huge gaping grilles and split headlights, a look that was loved at the time, but funny enough, seems to sell just quite fine today. Take a look at the Jeep Cherokee, many Hyundai models, and even Mitsubishi is doing that. The slanted rear hatch also gathered a lot of hate. It was meant to give a more sportier profile, but although this element was mocked at the time, now many SUVs like the Mercedes GLE Coupe, the BMW X6, the Volkswagen Atlas Cross Sport do the same exact thing to appear more athletic. Even cheaper vehicles like the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross couldn't resist to this trend. Another design choice that puzzled many buyers was the extensive plastic cladding. It looked odd back then, but today, rugged plastic trim is everywhere. Just look at the Subaru Crosstrek or the Mazda CX-30. Some companies like Chevy even put a full plastic cladding bumper like on the Chevrolet Bolt AUV. This used to be a sign of cost cutting because the manufacturer didn't have to paint that piece of trim. But now this is an off-road feature. Even with these forward-thinking features, the Aztek was an absolute sales disaster. From 2001 to 2005, Pontiac managed to move fewer than 120,000 units. While it's easy to dunk on the Aztek for its awkward looks, in hindsight, it was simply trying to do what nearly every automaker is doing today, just a little too soon. Some people have even pointed out that the Tesla Cybertruck is the spiritual successor to the Aztek. While it also has a polarizing design and unconventional approach, it emphasizes the functionality over aesthetics. It seems that being ahead of your time isn't always a recipe for success. The second generation Toyota Prius. The second gen Prius was introduced in 2004. It wasn't the first hybrid. That title goes to the Honda Insight. But it was the car that truly brought hybrid technology into the mainstream. While the Insight was a small two-seater with limited appeal, the Prius was a practical five-passenger vehicle with modern aerodynamics. It didn't just look futuristic on the outside, the interior was forward-thinking as well. The dashboard featured a centrally mounted touchscreen display, a feature that wasn't available in any non-luxury car in 2004. Toyota also introduced several industry firsts with the second-gen Prius. One of the most notable was the all-electric AC compressor. It was revolutionary because at the time that allowed the air conditioning to run even if the gasoline engine was off. This was a big deal as it improved efficiency and comfort in a stop-and-go traffic. The hybrid system itself was refined and user-friendly, making the transition between gas and electric power seamless. Unlike the Insight, which required a more involved driving style to maximize fuel efficiency, the Prius made hybrid technology easy to live with. It was reliable, incredibly fuel efficient, and became the go choice for eco-conscious drivers. Many celebrities actually had one, which is very surprising since this wasn't a luxury car. Today, nearly every major automaker offers a hybrid model, but back in 2004, Toyota was setting the stage for the electrified future of the auto industry. And by the way, the Prius is the only car in this list that didn't fail commercially. Next, we have the Chevrolet Volt, the first gen from 2010 to 2015. The Volt took the Prius concept to the next level by introducing a plug-in hybrid system with usable electric range. The 2011 to 2012 one had 35 miles of EV range, and the 2013 to 2015 one had 38 miles of EV range. While Toyota also had a plug-in hybrid version of the third generation Prius, its range was much lower, and even the later Prius Prime couldn't match what the Volt offered. The Volt allowed drivers to travel on electric power alone for a significant distance before switching to gasoline, something no other mainstream car at the time could do. Despite being a technological leap forward, the Volt struggled in the market. One major challenge was that GM had to educate consumers on how it worked. Unlike the Prius, which could be driven like any regular car with minimal learning, the Volt required a new mindset. Charging it regularly was necessary to maximize its efficiency, because once you didn't have any EV range on your Volt, the efficiency of the car was way below the Prius. On top of this issue was also the lack of charging infrastructure at the time, which made it less convenient for many buyers. Inside, the Volt was unlike anything else GM was selling at the time. The dashboard had a very futuristic look, complete with digital displays and touch-sensitive controls. GM clearly wanted to make the Volt feel like a cutting-edge product, but unfortunately they failed to market it properly. Instead of pushing it as a game changer, they treated it more like a compliance car, a move that hurt its visibility and sales. The Volt also faced some practical issues that limited its appeal. The first-gen model only had 4 seats, which was a drawback for families. However, the engineering behind the car was brilliant, especially when it came to handle cabin heating and cooling efficiency. Today, with a growing number of plug-in hybrids on the market, the Volt stands out as the first to offer a truly usable electric range, proving that it was ahead of its time, even if GM didn't give it the support it deserved. The Subaru Baja. The Baja was another vehicle that arrived too early for its own good. At the time, the idea of a small unibody pickup truck with all-wheel drive was almost unheard in the US market. Today, models like the Honda Ridgeline, the Ford Maverick, and also the Hyundai Santa Cruz prove that there is a strong demand for this type of vehicles. However, in the early 2000s, the Baja struggled to find its niche. Built between 2003 and 2006, the Baja was based on the Subaru Outback wagon, sharing its unibody chassis and all-wheel drive system. It was powered by a 2.5-liter flat-4 engine, producing 165 horsepower and 166 pounds-feet of torque in the base model. There was also a turbocharged version that arrived later, bumping out the output to 210 horsepower and 235 pound-feet of torque. The transmission option included a 5-speed manual or 4-speed automatic, and fuel economy was around 20 to 25 miles per gallon. One of Baja's standout features was the swift-back pass-through door, which allowed owners to fold down the rear seats and open a panel between the cabin and the bed, expanding the cargo capacity from 41.5 inches to 60 inches in length. This feature is not very common. The only two other cars I know that had it is the Chevy Silverado EV, the new one, and also the older Colorado. But despite this very clever design, the 41-inch bed was a lot smaller than any traditional pickups, limiting its appeal. Although you were also able to extend this bed outwards. Sales were very disappointing, with only about 30,000 units sold in the US, Canada, and Chile combined. It was a truck that drove like a car, which confused buyers who expected something more rugged. Had Subaru launched it in today's market, and here's an image I found on the internet, probably an AI rendering, it might have been a success, especially if it would be based on the new Forester or maybe the Outback. But in the early 2000s, the Baja was simply ahead of its time. What other model do you think could have made this list? Let me know in the comments down below, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.